My mama had just collapsed at home, 102 years old, barely breathing when the ambulance came. I was already on I-285, pushing through the snow, hands shaking on the wheel, when Malik called. Calm, warm, the voice I had trusted for 16 years. Baby, I'm already at Emory with her. She's stable. Drive careful. Don't rush. So I didn't rush, because that is what you do when you trust someone completely. But when I walked through those emergency doors, Nurse Richard stepped toward me with a look I will never forget. Mrs. Brooks, you're the first family member to arrive. We've been waiting over 3 hours for someone to sign the treatment forms. 3 hours. She paused, then added one more thing. There was also a call to the front desk, about 20 minutes before your husband left. Out-of-state number, a woman's voice. I asked to see the security footage, and what I saw, 7 minutes, 1 sunflower bag, 3 photographs, didn't just change everything I knew about my husband. It nearly destroyed everything my family had spent 3 generations building. This story begins on a quiet January night, but I promise you, it will not leave you unchanged. Before we continue, have you ever trusted someone so completely that you stopped paying attention? Drop your answer below. I read every single one. Quick note, some details have been adapted for the telling, but the heart of this, what blind trust really costs and what quiet strength looks like, that part is real. My name is Keisha Washington, 48 years old, financial analyst, 22 years of finding the number that doesn't belong, the line that breaks the pattern. Not once did I turn that eye on my own marriage. Room 4-North, door half open. My mama lay in that bed with an oxygen tube under her nose, hands folded on the blanket the way she folds them in church. She smelled like lavender and something I have never found a word for except home. She opened her eyes when she heard my step. Baby girl, you came alone? 3 words, and something cracked open in me right there in that doorway. Her hand was cold when I took it, lighter than I remembered. The skin so thin I could feel every knuckle, every year she had carried. I held it with both of mine and I did not say anything, because there was nothing yet I knew how to say. She didn't push me. She never does. Just watched me with that patience she has had my whole life, the kind that always made me feel both deeply known and completely safe. But right now, with those unsigned forms down the hall and a woman's voice from an out-of-state number still turning over in my mind, I did not feel safe at all. My phone lit up. Nia, 15 years old, still at home, face tight with worry on the video call. Mama, is Grandma Grace okay? Where's Dad? I told her Grandma was resting. I kept my voice even. I did not answer the second question. I sat beside Mama until the night shift changed, her hand in mine, whispering the old stories until her breathing steadied and her eyes stayed closed. And when the sun finally came up, gray and cold through that hospital window, I kissed her forehead, drove home, and sat down at my kitchen table. I opened my laptop, and I started looking. What I found in the first 20 minutes made my hands go completely still. Because this was never just about one lie. It was about a plan. And my name was already written into it. I signed every form myself, 11:30 at night, coat still damp. My name on line after line that my husband had left blank for 3.5 hours. I did not let myself think about what that meant. I just signed. Then I went back to Mama's room and I held her hand until the sun came up. I sang to her a little, whispered the old stories, the summer she picked cotton in Mississippi at 14, the day she got to Atlanta with $40 and a scrap of paper with an address on it. The way she always said every hard morning was God stretching you for what was coming. I watched her chest rise and fall, and I told myself Malik had panicked, that good men have bad moments, that 16 years does not dissolve because of one blank form and a phone call from a number I did not recognize. I told myself that, until I almost believed it. By morning, I could not stop the questions. The head of hospital security, a quiet man named Mr. Owens, pulled me aside during the shift change. Standard corridor cameras, all patient floors. He walked me to a small office and pulled up the 4th floor hallway footage. Malik arrived at 7:42. He left at 7:49. 7 minutes. And in those 7 minutes, he did not walk toward room 4-north. He walked to the storage alcove just outside it, where the hospital kept personal items checked in with patients on arrival. The camera could not read labels, but I recognized the bag the moment I saw it. Soft canvas, small sunflowers on the front. I gave it to Mama 3 Christmases ago. She kept her Bible in it, her reading glasses, and whatever papers she considered important enough to keep close. The footage showed him opening that bag, looking through something, taking out his phone, 3 photographs, zipping it shut, walking to the elevator. He had not gone to see my mother. He had gone to photograph what she was carrying. I sat in that office and said nothing, because a man who panics does not move like that, unhurried, deliberate, finished in exactly the time he had planned for. That was not a mistake. That was a visit with a purpose. I went home, made Nia breakfast, kissed her forehead, sat down at the kitchen table with every bank statement I could pull up. Malik's pattern had always been easy to read. Payroll, utilities, gym membership on Piedmont Road, his tailor on Peachtree Street a few times a year. Predictable, steady. But 18 months ago, something changed. Monthly transfers, small, 200 here, 350 there, memo line reading, Community Education Initiative. He sat on 2 nonprofit boards. It had seemed right. I had not looked close enough. The receiving account did not belong to either board. It belonged to an LLC registered in Decatur, Georgia, incorporated 11 months prior. Registered address, a mailbox suite on Wesley Chapel Road in DeKalb County. Same area code as the call that came into the hospital front desk the night my mother was admitted. I called Nia into the kitchen. She sat down across from me and said, "Mom, can I tell you something without you being upset I didn't say it sooner?" I told her yes. Dad gets calls after 11 most nights, and every time he goes to visit Grandma Grace, he turns off his location on the family app. Every single time. I noticed 3 weeks ago. She pulled out her phone, screenshots, every instance logged with the date and time. My 15-year-old had been documenting what I had been too trusting to see. Then she showed me one more thing. 2 days before Mama's hospitalization, Nia had been straightening Malik's home office the way she did every Saturday. On the corner of his desk, half tucked under a manila folder, a USB drive. She had photographed it before putting it back exactly where she found it. The label was in Malik's handwriting. Grace will, final draft. I told Nia to leave that room, close the door, touch nothing. Then I called Desmond Mercer. Desmond has practiced estate and family law in DeKalb County for 27 years. Went to church with my mother. The kind of man who says, "I'll be there in an hour," before you finish explaining why you called. He sat at my kitchen table, read through everything. The transfers, the LLC, the footage, Nia's screenshots, the USB label, without rushing, without reacting. Just reading, turning pages, making notes. When he finally looked up, he took his glasses off and set them on the table. "Keisha, this man is not just having an affair." He turned his laptop toward me. An email. Malik's personal account, sent 6 weeks earlier to the address connected to the Decatur LLC. Subject line, blank. Timing depends on Grace's condition. Don't move until the family is distracted. I walked out to my car. Sat there for 11 minutes with my hand on the keys and I could not turn them. That email was not impulsive. It was a schedule. My mother's life reduced to a timing variable in someone else's plan. 16 years of marriage, the Sunday dinners, the anniversaries, every time he reached for my hand, all of it running parallel to this, the whole time. Patient betrayal does not announce itself. That is the point of it. It looks exactly like love while it is happening. Then my phone rang. It was the hospital. Mama was more alert, asking for me. I drove back. She was sitting up slightly when I walked in, eyes clearer than they had been the night before. She reached for my hand and held it with both of hers. those small, strong hands that had built everything our family had. And she looked at me and said, "Baby, don't let anyone take what we built." Something shifted in me in that moment. Not just pain, something harder than pain, something that had a direction. I squeezed her hand, told her I wouldn't, and I meant it. What Desmond found next would reveal that Malik hadn't just planned to steal from my family. He had spent months building a trap designed to make sure I was the one who went to prison for it. Desmond worked carefully for 4 days. That is the truth about building a real case. It does not happen in one dramatic moment. It happens in long stretches of phone calls and document requests and late nights while you hold yourself together in front of your daughter and fall apart a little in the car. You drink too much coffee. You check your phone constantly. You keep moving because stopping feels like sinking. On the 5th day, Desmond came back to my kitchen with a legal pad full of notes and a look that told me to sit down before he started. The fund Malik had been stealing from was not some faceless organization. It was the Grace Washington Scholarship Foundation, named for my mother, built on 30 years of her work, her contacts, her reputation, her showing up to every board meeting and church potluck and donor dinner, year after year, decade after decade. That fund had sent 3 young people from our congregation to college. It had covered tuition for kids who had nothing else, kids whose parents worked double shifts and still came up short. And for 14 months, Malik had been quietly moving its money into the Decatur LLC. Small amounts, steady. The kind of movement that only someone paying very close attention would ever catch. Then Desmond told me something that stopped me cold. My mother had been paying attention. 8 months before any of this surfaced, Grace Washington had started noticing small inconsistencies in the foundation's quarterly reports. She had called her longtime attorney, a woman she had worked with during the civil rights movement, still practicing out of Marietta, and requested a private review of several documents. She had not told me. She had not confronted Malik. She had just started watching and writing things down. When Desmond arranged a video call that included Mama in her hospital room, she looked directly into the camera with those eyes, the ones that have never once in my whole life failed to see exactly what was in front of them, and said in a voice that trembled but did not waver, "A man who helps does not leave before the doctor asks for his signature." Malik, who had been copied on the call under the pretense of a family check-in, went pale. The foundation board opened an internal review, and then a former bookkeeper reached out to Desmond, a woman who had quietly resigned 8 months earlier without a clear explanation. She had kept copies. Internal meeting minutes that had been deleted from the foundation's shared files. Minutes from a board session 14 months ago in which Malik had formally proposed eliminating Nia's standing scholarship eligibility, a provision my mother had personally insisted on when she created the fund, citing a conflict of interest with the executive director's family. He had tried to cut my daughter out of the legacy her great-grandmother built, on paper, in a meeting, while I was home making dinner. There was a donor appreciation dinner that Friday at the Marriott Marquis on Peachtree Center Avenue. Malik was being honored as executive director. There would be a plaque, applause, his name said warmly into a microphone by people who trusted him completely and had no idea what I now knew. Desmond told me not to go. He said we were not ready to move. I went anyway. Gray wool dress, my mother's pearl earrings, the small ones she wore to church every Sunday of my childhood. I sat near the back and watched Malik work the room. The handshakes, the easy laugh, the way he leaned in when people talked to him like whatever they were saying was the most important thing he had heard all week. I had watched him do that same thing at 100 events and always thought it was one of the things I loved about him, how present he could make people feel. Sitting in that ballroom, watching it from the outside for the first time, I understood it differently. It was not warmth, it was technique. He spotted me before I was fully seated. I watched something move across his face. Recognition. Then a rapid, almost invisible recalibration. He excused himself from his conversation and crossed the room with a smile that looked completely natural to everyone there. Everyone except me. "Baby, I didn't know you were coming. I would have—" "I know," I said. "That's why I didn't tell you." He sat down beside me. And then Malik did something I had not prepared for. He turned the whole thing around. Right there in that ballroom, with 200 people close enough to overhear, he lowered his voice and told me my behavior had become erratic since Mama's hospitalization, that I had always struggled to separate personal anxiety from professional instinct, that the transfers I had apparently been going through were legally structured instruments that my limited understanding of nonprofit accounting had led me to misread. Said it gently, without raising his voice even slightly. That was the worst part, how gentle he sounded. He turned to the 2 board members at the nearest table and said his wife was in finance and sometimes had trouble switching off the auditing instinct at home. They nodded in that slightly uncomfortable way people do when they do not want to be part of a couple's disagreement. That polite, sideways smile that says, I am staying out of this. And then, because Malik had spent 16 years studying rooms, studying people, studying exactly how much ground a calm man can take when his wife is visibly distressed, he offered publicly to bring in an independent outside audit of the foundation's finances. Offered it like a man with nothing to hide. For one terrible moment, I felt the room shift. I felt myself turning into the character in the story he was telling. The overwrought wife, the woman who did not understand, the problem that needed to be handled with patience in a soft voice. I could feel the weight of 200 people's quiet, sympathetic attention settling on me like something I could not shake off. I left. I sat in the parking garage of the Marriott Marquis for 45 minutes, concrete walls, my hands in my lap. I was not crying. I was past crying by then. I was sitting with the very specific weight of being publicly reframed by someone who spent 16 years learning the map of you and then used that map to make you look small in front of the people whose respect mattered most. What Malik did that evening has a name. Researchers call it DARVO, deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. He took my legitimate knowledge and dressed it up as instability. He used my profession, the same credential he had been exploiting in his paper trail, as a way to dismiss me in front of witnesses. And he did it before I had the chance to speak first. The most disorienting part is that it works even when you see it happening. Because for one moment, just one, I questioned myself, wondered if I had misread something, wondered if I was the problem. That moment is what he had been counting on all along. I called Desmond from the parking garage. My voice was steadier than I expected. I laid out everything that had just happened, every word, every expression, the way the board members had nodded. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, Keisha, he just made a critical mistake. By publicly calling for an independent audit, Malik had created a documented record of that request. Said in front of witnesses, impossible to walk back. He had opened a door himself, with no idea what was already waiting on the other side of it. Then Desmond told me the part that made me stop breathing for a full moment. Malik had not just been running a scheme. He had been building an exit. The account structures, the memo lines, the timing of my signature on specific joint financial documents, my credentials as a licensed financial analyst, all of it positioned so that if things fell apart, the paper trail pointed at me first and most convincingly. He had constructed his own escape route using my name as the door. I would lose the house, my professional license, my reputation in every community we had ever shared. And Nia, already quietly cut out of the scholarship provision her great-grandmother had built for her, would lose the future Grace Washington had spent 30 years creating, dollar by careful dollar. I drove home at midnight through rain-wet streets, city lights smearing across the windshield on Peachtree Street. I thought about Nia asleep with her phone on her nightstand and her careful screenshots. I thought about Mama in that hospital room with her folded hands and her sharp, ancient eyes. I cried once, hard, for about 4 minutes. Then I stopped, opened my laptop, and got to work. What Malik did not know, what no one in that ballroom could have imagined, was that my mother had been 3 steps ahead of him for nearly a year. The board of the Grace Washington Scholarship Foundation suspended Malik Brooks on a Wednesday morning. The IRS field office on Spring Street in downtown Atlanta opened an inquiry into the Decatur LLC by Thursday afternoon. By Friday, the neighborhood knew. Not because anyone made a formal announcement. Communities do not need announcements. They feel things. Before the sky changes, before a word is spoken, something shifts and you just know. People who had known our family for decades started calling, not for information, to check on us. Reverend Cole from First Calvary Baptist drove over himself on Saturday morning. Miss Annette from next door showed up at our front door with a covered dish and 3 words. "Baby, I'm here." I had not told any of them a thing, but they came anyway. As the investigation deepened, the picture of the woman connected to the Decatur LLC became clearer. She was not simply someone Malik had been seeing behind my back. She was a co-founder of the LLC, her name on the registration papers, her account receiving the transferred funds for 11 months. This was not a mistake that grew out of something emotional. It was a plan that 2 people built together, carefully, over time. When investigators subpoenaed their message history, one exchange appeared in the documents that stopped everyone in Desmond's office cold. 8 months prior, Malik had written, "Just need the timing to work. Once the old woman passes, the estate question opens up and we move." He had been waiting for my mother to die. He had sat at her birthday table. He had hugged her at Christmas. He had bowed his head and spoken words of thanks over her food while she sat across from him. 101 years old, watching everything with those careful, quiet eyes. And the whole time, he had been doing math. I read those words in Desmond's office, and I did not say anything for a long time. There is a particular kind of ugliness in seeing someone reduced to a timeline in another person's planning. My mother, who had picked cotton at 14, who had walked into Atlanta with $40 and built something out of nothing, who had held my face in her hands at my college graduation and cried without making a sound, had been, in Malik's calculations, simply a variable, an obstacle with an expiration date. I thought I had already reached the bottom of what he was capable of. That sentence showed me I had not. Malik called me one afternoon while I was driving back from Desmond's office. I picked up. I am still not sure why. Maybe I needed to hear what his voice sounded like now that the walls were closing from every direction. The warmth was gone. Or maybe I could finally hear through it to what had always been underneath. He said he could explain everything. He said I was making it worse by involving attorneys. He said if I would just sit down with him and Desmond together, he could help the numbers make sense to me. I let him finish. Then I said, "Malik, you left my mother alone in an emergency room for 3.5 hours so you could photograph her legal documents. You planned to move her out of her own home. You built a fraud using my name and my credentials so I would go to prison in your place. And you sat at her table and said amen." He was quiet. "I have nothing left to say to you, and neither does she." I hung up. I want to stop here for a moment, because I have thought about that call many times. He never apologized. He offered to explain. Those are 2 entirely different things. An explanation says, "Let me show you why the numbers look the way they look." An apology says, "I know I hurt you, and I own it." Malik never moved toward accountability, not once. Even at the very end, the only instinct he had was to manage, reframe, find a version of the story that still left him in a survivable position. Some people, when they are caught, feel remorse. Some people, when they are caught, feel inconvenienced. That distinction tells you everything you need to know about who a person actually is underneath everything they have built on top. Now here is a part of the story I will carry with me for the rest of my life. 2 days after the suspension, my mother, 102 years old, 4 pounds lighter than when she had been admitted, still on a low-flow oxygen prescription, asked to speak with Desmond privately, just the 2 of them, in her hospital room, door closed. He was in there for 45 minutes. When he came out into the hallway, he had an expression I had never seen on him in 27 years of knowing him. Something between deep admiration and the quiet a person gets when they realize they have been in the presence of something much larger than they understood when they walked in. He said, "Keisha, your mama has been ahead of this for 8 months." 8 months prior, Grace Washington had called her attorney, a woman she had worked alongside during the civil rights movement, still practicing out of Marietta, and asked for a private appointment. Not to make changes to old documents, to create new ones. She had established an irrevocable trust. Everything she owned, the house on Flat Shoals Road she had bought outright in 1987, the property on Benjamin E. Mays Drive, her personal assets, her stake in the foundation, transferred on a protected legal schedule into a trust with one beneficiary designation, Keisha and Nia, jointly and solely. Malik had never been named. He had no standing to contest it. The trust had been executed, witnessed, and notarized 8 months before any of this became visible to anyone except my mother and her attorney. She had seen him before any of the rest of us had, and she had not panicked. She had not confronted him over Sunday dinner. She had not called me in tears at midnight. She had simply, quietly, methodically, with the patience of a woman who has outlasted everything the world has thrown at her, put the truth down in writing and waited for it to do what truth eventually does. There was one more thing. Tucked inside the envelope she had left in the hospital safe the night she was admitted, addressed in her own handwriting to the head nurse on duty, was a single, notarized page. A sworn statement describing her suspicions, the questions she had been asking, her attorney's name, the trust reference number. Not performed, just steady and real and documented. What my mother did over those 8 months is something I've spent a long time sitting with. She was 101 years old when she started, a body that needed oxygen and rest and careful movement, and yet she made phone calls, asked precise questions, sat with an attorney and gave clear, calm instructions, wrote a statement coherent enough to be notarized and clear enough to be understood by a complete stranger in the middle of a crisis. She did all of that alone, quietly, without alarming anyone, because she had decided her family's future mattered more than her own need to be believed before she had proof. She did not move until she knew. And when she knew, she did not react. She prepared. There is a kind of wisdom that only comes from having lived long enough to see what patience actually does. My mother had watched a century of people who moved too fast, and people who waited too long, and people who waited just long enough. She knew which one she needed to be, and she chose it with full clarity at 101 years old, with everything on the line. Malik showed up at the hospital 2 days later with a man later identified as a real estate consultant. He made a formal inquiry at the front desk about transferring my mother to a long-term care facility, presenting what he described as a guardianship document. The document was incomplete. Never filed with the probate court, he had no legal authority over Grace Washington's medical or residential decisions. None. The hospital security team, operating on written guidance Desmond had provided that morning, did not allow him past the lobby. He stood there, this tall, square-jawed man in his pressed shirt and expensive shoes, the man I had loved for 16 years. And he had nothing. No access, no authority, no leverage, no way out. The trap had already closed. And the woman who said it was upstairs resting, white hair pinned back, hands folded on the blanket, eyes, when she opened them, as sharp as they had ever been. 102 years old, and she had outmaneuvered all of us. What happened when we finally brought Mama home is what quietly put everything back together, one cup of tea at a time. We brought Grace Washington home on a Thursday in early February. The doctors had been careful with their optimism. A woman her age, after a cardiac episode, after a hospitalization that long? But my mother had apparently decided to recover. And once Grace Washington decided something, even her vital signs seemed to fall in line. Her blood pressure steadied. Her oxygen levels came up on their own. The attending physician told me he did not have a clean clinical explanation for how fast she was improving. I told him, she has things to attend to. He smiled like he almost believed me. The drive back from Emory to Decatur took 40 minutes in the Thursday afternoon traffic. Nia sat in the back seat the entire way, holding her great-grandmother's hand. They did not talk much. Nia had one earbud in, and Mama had her eyes half closed. They just held on to each other through every stoplight and lane change, the way people hold on when they have been scared of losing something, and it is back now, and they are not quite ready to ease their grip. I watched them in the rearview mirror and felt something I do not have an exact word for. Not happiness, that was too light for this. More like the specific, bone-deep relief of knowing what matters most and being in the same car with it. The house on Flat Shoals Road was warm when we arrived. Miss Annette from next door had let herself in with the spare key, turned the heat up, and left something on the stove that smelled like chicken and onion and bay leaf. The front porch light was on even though it was 3 in the afternoon. Someone had swept the walk clean. I helped Mama up the 3 front steps. She insisted on walking herself, one hand on the rail, chin lifted, eyes straight ahead. She stopped on the porch before we went inside and looked out at the yard for a long moment. The way she looks at things she has not seen in a while and wants to make sure are still there. The red maple at the corner of the lot was bare in the February cold, but it was standing. "The red maple's still there," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." And we went inside. We got her settled in the back bedroom, the one she has slept in since 1987. Reading glasses on the nightstand, her favorite cardigan draped over the chair, the framed photograph of her own mother on the dresser, exactly where it has always been. Nia plumped the pillows 3 times before Mama told her, gently but clearly, that twice had been plenty. That evening, the 3 of us sat at the kitchen table, the old oak one with 40 years of coffee ring stains and the initials my uncle scratched into the underside when he was 8 years old, thinking nobody would ever find them. And we had tea. Mama had hers with half a spoon of honey, same as always, same as it will always be as long as I have any say in it. I set the envelope on the table, the one she had left in the hospital safe the night she was admitted, the one Nurse Richards had been holding. Desmond had given it to me, and I had been carrying it in my purse for 2 weeks, not quite ready to sit still long enough to let it fully land. Mama looked at it, then at me. She did not say anything, the way she does not say things when the thing does not need saying. "Mama, you knew." She picked up her tea, thought about it the same deliberate way she thinks about everything. "I suspected," she said. "There is a difference. I didn't know until I knew, and when I knew, I wrote it down." "Why didn't you tell me?" She set the cup down carefully, the way she sets everything down, like even small things deserve to be handled with intention. "Because you were still deciding what to believe, baby," she said, "and a woman has to come to that herself." Nia sat across the table with her hands around her mug, listening the way she listens, all the way without performing it. I thought about what it had cost my mother to stay quiet, to watch Malik sit at her table, to watch me trust him, to hold what she knew and wait, because she understood that if she handed me the truth before I was ready to receive it, I might not be able to hold it. She had protected me by letting me find it myself. That is a particular kind of love. The kind that does not announce itself. It just holds the door open and waits for you to walk through. Malik moved out at the end of February. I am not going to pretend that was triumphant. It was not. It was quiet and sad the way endings are sad even when they are right and necessary. There were 17 minutes one Saturday afternoon when I sat on the bedroom floor going through the closet and I cried. Not for him exactly, but for the marriage I had genuinely believed in. For 16 years that had been completely real to me, even when they were not entirely real. Then I got up and kept moving. Because that is what Grace Washington raised me to do. The house is in my name now. The foundation is being restructured. New board leadership, independent oversight, everything my mother personally approved from her kitchen chair with her reading glasses on. Nia's scholarship eligibility has been restored and written into the Foundation's core documents in language clear enough that no one will ever blur its edges again. The IRS investigation is still ongoing. Desmond says these things take time. I have learned to be patient with slow processes, because slow processes done carefully are how things actually get done right. Not quickly, not dramatically, but completely. I drove past Emory one afternoon in March on my way back from a client meeting in Midtown. Just happened to be on Clifton Road. I slowed down when the entrance came into view. Same doors I had pushed through in January with snow in my hair and my coat damp and a husband's voice telling me everything was fine. I did not stop, but I looked. I thought about Nurse Richard stepping toward me in that cold hallway and telling me the truth when she did not have to. About Desmond picking up on a Saturday morning and saying he would be there in an hour. About Nia, 15 years old, taking screenshots on school nights because something in her told her to. About my mother, 102, who looked at a man the whole community trusted and quietly, no drama, no confrontation, not one raised voice, decided to write the truth down and let it do what truth does. I thought about how close I had come to signing things in a panic, to letting the distraction of grief be the exact distraction someone had carefully engineered. An old song came on the radio, one of Mama's, from the 70s, the kind she hums while she makes biscuits on Sunday mornings. I turned it up and drove home. But the real healing, the part that changed how I understand love itself, happened on a Sunday afternoon in early spring when my mother opened a small wooden box. Spring came to Decatur the way it always does, quietly, in pieces. A warm afternoon inside an otherwise cold week. A bud on the red maple out front. The smell of somebody's charcoal grill drifting over the back fence on a Saturday evening when you had not expected it, and the smell alone made you feel like something was going to be okay. By April, Mama was sitting on the back porch after lunch in her pale cardigan watching the yard. Nia would come home from school and do her homework at the porch table while Mama dozed in the chair beside her. I would come home to that. Pencil on paper, the old boards creaking under somebody's shifting weight, the jasmine vine along the back fence that has been growing there since before Nia was born, and I would stop in the kitchen doorway for a minute and just take it in. I did not rush those moments anymore. I had learned, the hard way, not to. One Sunday afternoon in April, Mama called me out to the porch. She was holding the small wooden box from the top shelf of her closet. The one I had noticed my whole childhood but never asked about. The way children sense there are some things you wait to be shown. Inside were letters, photographs, documents folded so many times the creases had gone soft and pale. She reached in and handed me a photograph. 3 young women standing in front of what I recognized, after a moment, as the old DeKalb County Courthouse in Decatur, arms linked, smiling in the way people smile when they are determined and scared and committed to showing neither one. "That's me," Mama said, pointing to the woman in the middle. 1964, the summer we finally got the voter registration office to open its doors. I held the photograph for a long time. The woman in it was young. Younger than Nia is now feels possible. But the posture was exactly the same. Chin up, eyes forward, holding on to the women beside her and being held. "We were scared," she said, "but we showed up anyway. That's all it ever is, Keisha, showing up when it's hard." Nia had come outside at some point and was leaning in the doorframe, arms crossed, listening with that particular stillness she has when something is actually reaching her. Mama glanced over at her. "You too, Nia Bird. Those pictures you took on your phone, that was showing up. Don't ever underestimate what a quiet person with good instincts can do." Nia looked at the porch floor, the way she does when she is more moved than she wants to let on. Then she looked back up. "Grandma Grace," she said quietly, "were you scared? When you were doing all of it, the will, the trust, all of it, by yourself?" Mama was quiet for a moment, smoothed the blanket over her knees with both hands. "I was tired," she said finally. Scared and tired feel about the same in the body, but I had been tired before, many times. You just keep your hands moving. I have thought about that sentence almost every day since she said it. You just keep your hands moving. It does not ask you to be fearless. It does not ask you to be certain or strong or ready. It only asks you to keep going while you are still afraid, And somehow, and I did not believe this until I lived it, that is enough. What I have learned through all of this is still unfolding. Real lessons do not arrive complete. They come in pieces, and you keep finding new ones in ordinary moments, months later, when you are not looking. But the clearest thing I know now is this. Trust without attention is not love. It is habit. And habit, no matter how comfortable or familiar, is not the same as actually seeing the person in front of you. Real love pays attention. It asks questions. It notices when something shifts before it becomes something you cannot undo. I had confused loyalty with passivity for most of my adult life. I had believed that trusting someone completely meant never questioning. My mother showed me, through a notarized page in a hospital safe, through an old wooden box of photographs, through 45 quiet minutes behind a closed door, that staying awake is not a failure of love. It is love's most serious and most necessary form. Our family is smaller now. Some Sundays I notice the chair at the kitchen table that nobody sits in, and I feel the weight of what is no longer there. I let myself feel it. I do not rush past it. But there are other Sundays, more of them now, and I believe more still to come, when the three of us are out on that back porch with sweet tea and Nia's music coming through the little speaker on the windowsill, and Mama tells stories about people who have been gone for 40 years, and Nia laughs at exactly the right moments and asks the questions that bring the light back into Mama's eyes. In those moments, I feel something I can only call abundance, not despite everything, somehow because of it, because we are here, because we chose each other, because the people who were meant to leave did leave, and we stayed. The porch swing still creaks the same way it has always creaked. Nia calls it Grandma Grace's alarm system, which makes Mama press her lips together in that way that means she is trying very hard not to smile and is losing the battle. The red maple has leafed out fully now, bright green against the spring sky, full and unhurried. There is a church bazaar in May, and Mama has already put in her request for the apple cake with the brown sugar glaze. Even though I burned the edges the last 2 times I made it, I am going to make it anyway. And if I burn it again, I will make another one. Because that is what you do. You keep your hands moving. You show up when it is hard. You protect the ones who need protecting, and you let yourself be protected by the ones who love you quietly, without needing any recognition for it. And eventually, not all at once, not in any single moment, but in small, quiet pieces, the way spring comes back to Decatur every single year without fail, you heal. This story teaches us that trust given without attention can become an open door we do not know we have left unlocked. That love given with clear eyes builds something no one can take. That the oldest people in our lives are sometimes the ones watching most carefully, doing protection work we did not even know we needed. That our children are always watching, not just listening to what we say, but deciding who they will become by watching who we choose to be when things are at their hardest. And it teaches us that after betrayal, even the kind that reaches 16 years deep and rewrites what you thought you knew, there is still a Sunday afternoon waiting on the other side of it. Still a back porch. Still a cup of tea with half a spoon of honey. Still 3 generations of women who chose each other and are still standing. Quiet strength is not the absence of pain. It is what you build with your hands while the pain is still there. If this story moved you, I want to ask you something real, and I want your honest answer in the comments. If you had been in my place that January night, driving to the hospital, terrified for your mama, your husband's voice warm on the phone telling you everything was fine, would you have questioned it? Or would 16 years have done exactly what it did to me? There is no wrong answer. I read every single comment. And I am grateful, more than I know how to say, that you stayed with me all the way to the end.